All right, welcome back. This week we're going to be dealing with convections. Convections are candies or ice creams or any type of sweet treats. The option I decided to go with this week was going to be the Espresso Granita. With this option, what we're going to basically be doing is a Granita is flavor, sugar, and ice. And what we're basically doing is separating ice crystals with sugar. Since sugar lowers the freezing temperature, according to Corriere, of the ice, it actually causes the crystals to kind of separate in between the actual sugar. It's very similar to when we made the pie crust and we had the fat or the butter that was separating the different layers of flour to give a flaky crust. Same type of situation, except for what this is, the sugar is going to separate it to make finely even crystals, giving it a nice texture. For this recipe, I'm going to be doing the experiment with using honey versus using sugar. I was limited on some resources, so I'm actually going to be halving the recipe. So rather than using 2 cups of espresso, I'm going to use a cup of espresso for one, a cup for the other. And then I'll be using 1 tablespoon of honey instead of the 2 tablespoons, and I'll be using a 1/4 cup of table sugar instead of the actual half cup. I also want to mention I'm not going to be using the Kahlua, so that's why we're not going to be using a 1/3 cup, since the Kahlua actually, you don't need as much sugar since it's contributing to that. Since I don't have any Kahlua on hand just for a couple tablespoons, I didn't think it was worth buying. So I'm just going to bump it back up to that half mark, but for the actual experiment, halving that to a 1/4 cup. And then also we have I'll do an 1/8 of lemon zest and an 1/8 of teaspoon of orange zest as well. For my brands, I have the table sugar is just a Kroger value brand. Same thing with the honey, just a Kroger brand. Lemon zest and orange zest on each side. I didn't have anything to actually make the espresso, so I went to a local coffee shop called the Donkey House. Interesting name, interesting place. I just went in and asked for 2 things of espresso, which I believe they said it was about 2 ounces for one of the espressos. So we're looking at about 4 ounces I walked away with, and I diluted it up to 2 cups. So just to let you know, it's not full espresso, it's more comparable to a strong coffee. And what we're going to be doing for this Granita is I'm just going to take 1 cup of the espresso in one bowl, my 1/4 cup of sugar in this one, and then for this one, the other cup. For this, I'll be doing the 1 tablespoon of honey. And then an 1/8 of orange zest to each of them, 1/8 a teaspoon, and 1/8 a teaspoon of the lemon zest for each of them. And what we're basically going to do is I'm going to get the sugar diluted into this espresso mixture. And once I get it fully dissolved in there, I'm going to leave it I'm going to put it in the freezer. It's going to sit there for an hour just to start setting, and after that point I'm going to start stirring every 15 minutes so the ice crystals are going to start forming, and I want to break those ice crystals up and get the sugar evenly distributed in between it. So every 15 minutes or so I'm going to keep breaking up those ice crystals, separating the sugar from the ice, making sure that we get a nice, even, not hard texture. If you don't have enough sugar, what can happen is it can turn to an ice block, according to Corriere, too tough, and you'd actually need a pickaxe to get it done. Whereas if we have too much sugar, it separates it too much, and it actually turns it into kind of a mushy consistency, kind of like snow that's melted. It's not a real desirable texture. So what we're going for is more of like a soft ice. Is a comparable way. So what I'm going to end up doing is just whisking these. Once I get them fully diluted, then dissolved, I'm going to put them in the freezer, let them sit for an hour, and then I'll bring them back out and show them what they look like then. I forgot to mention, on the espresso, the recipe calls for cooled brewed espresso. I wanted to make sure that it was about room temperature. I let them sit out, and I took the temperature that came out to be 76.9 degrees Fahrenheit. The other one was 76.7, so they're about very similar. Also, what I wanted to say was, since the honey, we're actually going to use 1 tablespoon, which is the equivalent of 2.5 tablespoons of sugar. I calculated it out for the 1/4 cup of sugar and the 1 tablespoon of honey. So for the table sugar mixture, we're going to have a 25% sugar mixture, and the other one's going to be a 15.6 percentage with the honey. And McGee actually mentions that you want somewhere in between a 25 to 35. So we're going to see if that honey is kind of a harder texture since it is the lower percentage, and the sugar is going to be right at 25, so it'll be on the lower end. So we should be expecting a tougher texture, but we'll compare the two whenever that time comes. Also, since I didn't make espresso myself, I might as well tell you guys how they make it. What they do is they take high pressurized steam and they put it through coffee grounds, giving a nice concentrated, very strong coffee pretty much. So I'm going to have these in the freezer. It's 5:22, so it's 6:22. I'll see you then. Alright guys, I just got them out of the freezer for being in there for an hour. I took the temperature. The freezer came out to be 13.6 degrees Fahrenheit. This espresso solution's kind of hardened, but it's it's kind of still liquidy. It's going to have to sit in there for a while. I'm still going to stir it up just to kind of make sure the sugar crystals are still going. The one thing I wanted to mention about sugar crystallization, the 3 important things are purity, concentration, and temperature. Since we used pure table sugar for one and then all honey for the other, we're not going to be crossing the different types of sugars. So they'll definitely be pure, and the concentrations have been set out to the 15.6 for the honey and the 25% for the sugar. And our temperature, as well as what we're going to do, is we're just going to keep freezing it. And the agitation with stirring is going to cause those crystals to start forming, but they're going to form smaller crystals that are uniform, going to be easier texture, not as hard, and that's what we're going for. So I'm going to pop them in and check them in probably about 30 minutes. Alright guys, after a long process, about 4 hours, I did the first hour. I just let them sit in there to solidify, and you saw that they were still kind of liquidish. So I put them back in for another 30 minutes, and that's when they started crystallizing up. From then on, every 15 minutes, I took them out and stirred them up. I recorded how many times I stirred them up and took the temperature a couple times, and I have some pictures, and that's what you saw previously before this video segment. This is our one that had the table sugar. It's the 25% sugar. As you can see, it's very malleable. The crystallization is really small, telling me that the sugar crystals, very small, uniform, coated in the syrup from the espresso. This one's the honey. It has a 15% more, so this one actually is a little harder, not much though, very still similar, but the ice crystals are more coarse. I don't know if you can tell, but there's some definitely difference in the flakiness. This one has bigger ice crystals than the other one, which is to be expected since it is a lower percentage of sugar. We're going to have more water crystallizing, and it's going to crystallize at a higher temperature because the sugar isn't lowering that temperature for us. I'm going to try it. It's the table sugar one. Oh yeah, that's definitely good. Strong espresso flavor. I'm surprised that I actually did get the orange and lemon zest in there. The ice crystals, they're flaky. I can actually feel them like melt, and as they melt, the concentrated espresso like sits on my tongue, and kind of resonates there. It's a good aftertaste. And then I'm going to try the honey. Definitely bigger
bigger crystals, not as much flavor, surprisingly. And maybe I'm mistaking the flavor for the sugar, or it just has a more water flavor. And it's probably because of the lower sugar percentage. Both very good, but I would recommend the 25% sugar over the 15.6% sugar that was provided by the honey. When they did come out, the final temperature was 27.3 degrees Fahrenheit. That's convection.